The wind that rolled across the high plains of Wyoming Territory in the winter of 1887 carried many things: snow, dust, old ghost stories whispered by cowboys around lonely campfires. But that night, it carried something else. It carried him. Rancher Jacob Jake Halston, 39, broad-shouldered, dust-stained, and known for speaking only when needed, rode through the blizzard with his coat pulled tight and his hat low. Frost had bitten his beard white, and his stallion's breaths came out in thick clouds. He had faced rustlers, wolves, droughts, and the worst nature could offer. But tonight nature had nearly bested him. His ranch lay 30 miles behind him, swallowed by the storm. He had set out early that morning to deliver supplies to a sick calf, sheltering at a neighbor's barn. But the storm had hit too soon, too fast. He had been caught in the open. If he did not find shelter by nightfall, the cold would take him. His horse stumbled, and Jake leaned forward, urging him on. "Just a little farther, boy. I saw a chimney somewhere up ahead." It wasn't just hope. He had seen it: thin, gray smoke curling against the white sky. A cabin. A warm one. As he pushed through the storm, a shape finally appeared: dark, sturdy timber walls, warm lamplight glowing behind the frosted windows, a stone chimney puffing smoke into the sky. Jake almost didn't believe it was real. But when he knocked on the heavy wooden door, breath shuddering in his chest, it opened, and she stood there. Evelyn Ridgway, the widow who lived alone at the edge of the pines. 38, graceful, strong, solemn, a woman carved from quiet storms and silent endurance. Her eyes widened when she saw him leaning on her porch rail, half-frozen. "Mr. Halston, heaven above, come in, before you die out there." She grabbed his arm, small hand, warm touch, and pulled him inside. He stumbled into the heat of her cabin, the smell of burning cedar filling his lungs like salvation. "You look like the storm nearly swallowed you whole," she said, shutting the door behind him. "It tried," Jake answered with a tired grin. Evelyn brushed snow from his coat, concern softening her features. She wore a simple wool dress, patched at the sleeves, her hair tied in a loose bun that let a few strands fall around her forehead. A widow of 10 years, quiet, private, and never remarried. People in town said she preferred books to men. Jake had always wondered if that was true. "Sit by the fire," she said, guiding him to an armchair. "Your hands are blue. Feels that way." As she placed a blanket over his shoulders, Jake took in the cabin. Warm, tidy, with shelves of books, a quilted bedspread, herbs hanging from the ceiling to dry. A life lived in careful order. "You didn't expect visitors tonight," he said. "I never do. This place is too far off the trail." Jake nodded. That's why he wasn't sure the smoke had been real. "It's a miracle I found you." "Not a miracle," she said with a small smile. "Just luck." He looked into her eyes, deep, steady, carrying stories no one knew. And something else. Something lonely. Evelyn turned away before he could read more. "You're welcome to stay the night, Mr. Halston." Jake shook his head. "Storm's not easing. Might be more than one night." She hesitated. "Then however long you need." He saw something flicker in her expression: nerves? Worry. Something she tried to hide. But she busied herself with heating stew on the stove, pouring him warm water to thaw his hands. She moved quietly, gracefully, as if she had been caring for someone all her life, though she lived alone. Jake studied her as she stirred the pot. The firelight lit the curves of her cheek, the soft line of her neck, the way her breath caught, just slightly, when she realized he was watching. "You live alone out here," Jake said softly. "Must get quiet." "It does. But quiet isn't the worst thing a woman can have." He understood the unspoken words. Being lonely was worse. As they ate together, Jake noticed her hands tremble slightly when he asked simple questions. "How long you been here alone?" 10 years since my husband passed." "You never remarried?" She froze for a fraction of a second. "No, never wanted to. Not in the way people imagine." Jake tilted his head. "Meaning?" She placed her spoon down, folded her hands in her lap, and stared into the fire. "People assume that a widow has known everything a wife ought to know, but that isn't always true." Her voice lowered. "Some of us didn't get the chance." Jake's heartbeat slowed. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? Before he could speak, she stood abruptly. "Let me prepare the guest room. It's small, but I'll take the floor near the fire," Jake said. "No need to fuss." "I insist," she replied too quickly. Her cheeks were flushed. Jake wondered what she was hiding, and why she seemed so flustered with him being there. That night, lying beneath her spare quilt, Jake listened to the storm roar outside. Thunder shook the walls, wind howled through the pines, yet inside her cabin was warm, safe. He was drifting toward sleep when he heard footsteps. Soft, barefoot. Evelyn paused outside the guest room door. "Mr. Halston?" she whispered. "Jake," he corrected gently. "Jake." Her voice trembled. If you need anything during the night, anything at all, please call for me. He opened his eyes. Something in her tone wasn't hospitality. It was fear. Not of him. Of herself. Good night, Evelyn, he said softly. Good night. But she didn't leave immediately. He sensed her standing there a moment longer, her breath catching as if she wanted to say more or confess something, but couldn't. Finally, her footsteps retreated down the hall. Jake closed his eyes again, but sleep did not come. Something was happening here. Something she was afraid to speak. And he had a feeling the storm outside wasn't the only one he would face. The next morning, snowdrifts stood waist-deep outside the windows. The storm had buried the forest, the trail, everything. Jake wasn't going anywhere. For 3 days, he would be trapped in that cabin. 3 nights under her roof. 3 nights to discover her secret. And the first hint came at breakfast. Evelyn burned the eggs. Jake smiled softly. You're distracted. No, I'm. She paused, sighed, and leaned against the kitchen counter. Yes, I am. He waited. Finally, she spoke. There's something I should tell you. Something no one else knows. Jake looked at her gently. You can tell me. Her hands gripped the counter so tightly her knuckles whitened. I'm a widow, she said, but I was never truly a wife. Her voice cracked. I was married, but my husband died before we ever shared a marriage bed. She looked away, ashamed. I'm 38 years old, Jake, and I've never known a man. Jake felt breathless, not because of her confession, but because of the vulnerability it took to speak it. Evelyn, he said softly, stepping toward her. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't understand. People would talk. They'd laugh. They'd say I'm broken or cursed. People talk no matter what, Jake said gently. But I don't. She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time, he saw desire in her eyes. Real, raw, unmistakable. I've never told a soul, she whispered. Why tell me, he asked. She swallowed, voice trembling. Because you're the first man I ever felt safe around. Jake's chest tightened. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something far more dangerous stirred. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to step away. But she didn't. His fingers brushed a strand of her hair back, behind her ear. You're safe with me, he said gently. Her breath shuddered, her cheeks flushing warm as embers. And for a moment, just a moment, the world shrank to the small space between them. But then she stepped back abruptly. Forgive me, she whispered. I shouldn't have said that. You didn't do anything wrong. I invited a stranger into my home. I confessed something foolish. Evelyn, he said firmly. I'm not leaving. Not until the storm clears. Not until you're comfortable again. Her eyes softened. Grateful. Hopeful. Afraid. That night, the storm grew even worse. And so did the tension between them. Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing she was only a few steps away, likely staring at her own ceiling, thinking of what she had confessed. Thinking of him. When dawn came, he rose early to chop wood. But when he opened the door, he found Evelyn already outside, wrapped in a shawl, trying to shovel snow away from the porch. What are you doing out here? Jake asked, stepping toward her. You'll freeze. I needed some air. You should have waited for me. I couldn't sleep. Her eyes flicked up. I kept thinking about what I told you. Jake's breath hung in the air between them. And, he asked gently, I'm not ashamed anymore, she whispered. Not around you. Jake stepped closer. The cold air turned warm between them. And Evelyn Ridgway, the woman who had lived a lifetime in silence, finally let herself breathe. The storm would trap him there 2 more nights. 2 nights for a widow who had never known a man. 2 nights for a rancher who had spent a lifetime alone. 2 nights that would change both of their lives. Forever. The second night began with thunder shaking the cabin walls. Lightning cracked across the sky, casting sharp shadows through the windows. Evelyn stood at the hearth stirring stew, but her hands trembled. Jake could see it. I make you nervous, he said quietly from behind her. She froze. No, not nervous. Just uncertain. Of me. Of myself. Jake stepped closer, his boots soft on the wood floor. You don't have to be afraid, he said softly. I'm not afraid. She set the spoon down and gripped the counter. I'm inexperienced. You don't owe anyone experience, Jake replied. Least of all me. Her breath caught. You say that so easily. Because it's true. She turned, her gaze meeting his. The fire behind her glowed like a halo, illuminating her soft features, her trembling lips, the haunted vulnerability in her eyes. Jake, she whispered. I've lived alone for so long. I've forgotten what it feels like to be close to someone. He took a step toward her. I haven't, he said quietly. But I've missed it. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled. And something inside her broke free. Jake, if I ask you something, will you answer honestly? Always. Her voice was barely audible. If I weren't a widow, if I weren't untouched, would you still look at me like you do? Jake didn't even hesitate. I look at you because you're Evelyn, he said. Not because of what you've done or haven't done. He gently touched her chin, lifting her gaze to his. You're enough, he whispered. Just as you are. Her eyes softened, brimming with emotion. Jake, before he could speak again, lightning cracked, blowing out the lamp on the table. Evelyn startled, stepping closer to him, instinctively seeking his warmth. Jake caught her, and for a long moment, neither moved. Her hand rested against his chest, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. Your heart, she whispered. It's steady. It is now. She lifted her eyes. Why? Because you're here. The cabin felt impossibly quiet. Snow tapped at the windows. The fire snapped softly. You can tell me to step back, Jake said gently. I will. I'll respect whatever you want. She didn't step back. Instead, she whispered, Stay. Jake inhaled slowly, deeply, as though trying to anchor himself. Evelyn, I've been alone for 10 years, she said, voice shaking. But not once in all that time has any man looked at me the way you do. Her fingers curled into his shirt. And I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. Jake's breath hitched. Are you sure? He asked softly. No, she said with a trembling smile. But I want to learn. Jake touched her cheek, his calloused thumb brushing gently across her soft skin. I'll teach you anything you want to know, he whispered. At your pace. Only as far as you want. Her eyes glistened. Her voice broke. I trust you. Jake lowered his forehead to hers. Then we'll take it slow. The first night. Jake didn't kiss her at first. He let her explore. His hands, his shoulders, the shape of his jaw. She trembled at every new sensation, every discovery. Is this normal? She whispered when her breath shuddered. Yes, he murmured. You're doing perfect. When he finally kissed her, soft, slow, warm, Evelyn's entire body melted into him, years of loneliness dissolving in a single breath. She had never been kissed like that, never kissed at all. She broke away only to whisper, voice breathless. Jake, I didn't know it could feel like this. He smiled softly, brushing his knuckles along her jaw. You haven't felt anything yet. Her blush warmed his chest more than the fire. They fell asleep in each other's arms on the sitting room rug, the storm raging outside, while peace wrapped itself around them. The second night, the storm worsened, but inside, Evelyn grew braver. She asked questions, blushing, shy, honest questions that made Jake smile more than anything ever had. Is this too forward? Does this feel right? Can I touch you here? Each time, Jake met her with patience, warmth, and reassurance. You're doing beautifully, he whispered against her hair. Just follow what feels right. Evelyn laughed, a soft, nervous sound that filled the cabin with warmth. I never imagined sharing nights like this with someone like you. Jake kissed her forehead. Someone like me? A man who looks at me like I'm more than just a widow. Jake held her tighter. You're so much more. Her eyes brimmed. No man had ever spoken to her like that. And when she laid her head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her cheek, she whispered, I think I understand now why people fall in love. Jake went still. Her breath caught. I didn't say I was, she whispered quickly. But I'm beginning to understand. Jake kissed the top of her head. So am I. The third night. The third night was the most quiet. The storm slowed. The wind softened. The sky outside cleared just enough for moonlight to spill across the snow. Inside, Evelyn curled against Jake as if she belonged there. Will you leave when the trail clears? She asked softly. Jake hesitated. Do you want me to? Her fingers curled into his coat. No. Jake exhaled, his breath warm against her temple. Then I won't. She looked up at him, eyes hopeful, terrified, full of something new, something she'd never felt before. Jake, what happens to us now? He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. That depends on what you want, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. Her voice broke as she whispered, I don't want you to go. Jake kissed her softly, slow, tender, full of everything he couldn't put into words. And Evelyn Ridgway, 38, untouched, lonely for a decade, finally understood what it meant to share her nights with someone who saw her, wanted her, cherished her. After the storm, when the trail finally cleared, Jake saddled his horse. Evelyn stood on the porch, the cold wind tugging at her shawl. You're leaving, she whispered, eyes on the snow. For one day, Jake said. She blinked. One day, I have to tell my ranch hands I won't be back for a while. Her breath caught. You're coming back? Jake stepped close, lifted her chin gently. I'm coming home, he said, if you'll have me. Tears brightened her eyes. I will, she whispered. Jake kissed her slowly. I'll be back before sundown tomorrow. And after that? She asked softly. Jake smiled, brushing his thumb across her cheek. After that, I reckon we'll figure out the rest together." Evelyn smiled, the first unguarded smile in 10 years. And as Jake rode away, the wind no longer felt cold, because for the first time, since she lost her husband, she wasn't alone. She wasn't untouched. She wasn't unwanted. She was loved. And the rancher who learned her secret was now a part of her life forever.